And what is welcome to the Three Dudes Fantasy Football Show, Fantasy Spin Season, preseason reaction, but some might call it reaction with what we saw. A full week one slate of games. What it do? I'm JJ Buck. We got Steven Masterson, Aaron Hernandez with you. And so much football was played. And you always have to take some of these things with a grain of salt. It is preseason football, but what you want to see is performances, who's playing with who, the starters, the backups, route participation. These are the things we can start to build on to then go with all the things we've talked about leading up to fantasy draft season because we are in it. It is August. It's under a month until we will be playing fantasy football regular season style, and it's go time. And with that being said, gentlemen, let's waste no time. Let's go to the top, the hype,
Let's go.
the spin. And I want to talk about start or stash because I have a feeling over the next 2 weeks that these two quarterbacks are going to be flirting with top 10 status in redraft leagues. So fighting for QB10 and every week starting quarterback. And I'm talking about Jayden Daniels, the Commanders, second overall pick, the Heisman Trophy winner from LSU. Caleb Williams, the future of the franchise for the Chicago Bears, the number one overall pick. They played and they looked good, solid, confident in their debuts. And right now, Jayden Daniels, QB 12 as of today in PPR Fantasy ADP, courtesy of Fantasy Pros. Caleb Williams, QB 15. So they're already flirting with that. So let's look at Jayden Daniels and why he's ahead of Caleb Williams. It's the legs, it's the rushing touchdowns, which we saw him score in that game. Jayden Daniels had that designed rushing attempt for a 3-yard score in the red zone. He played 11 snaps, had 3 dropbacks, completed 2 of 3 passes for 45 yards. Caleb Williams, 18 snaps, 8 pass attempts on the 2 drives he played, 4 of 7 passes for 95 yards. Also has a nice 13-yard scramble, showing his athleticism. But for Caleb Williams, we saw the different arm angles, why there was that little bit of talk about Caleb has some of those Mahomes-like traits. And for Jayden Daniels, it's a pure athleticism. We saw him throw the football down the field. We know it's going to be used in the run game. So I've talked enough about these guys. I want to ask you the question. I'll start with you, Aaron, first. Start or stash? What are you doing with these super hyped rookie quarterbacks?
Oh man, it's a little early, but Jayden Daniels, he looks athletic, dynamic, and Caleb Williams looked pretty good as well. So it's like, they're gonna keep climbing. Interest is gonna be there. If they keep having a great preseason, it's like I might definitely stash one for sure, and it could be that they may be starting on someone's team come draft day, man. So it'll be interesting to see. It's the hype's definitely there, and it's
It's
probably
the
going to
hype,
continue.
it's the thinking of what can be, and I think people are going to be looking at this on their list, right? And this is an area when you look at the ranks, and I put it up there, kind of what we're seeing. You have your Brock Purdy, Tua, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence in that range. And Steve, I think some of those people they realize, yeah, Purdy, Goff, they're winning football games, but they don't feel like they wow you in fantasy football. And that's why I think Jayden Daniels, Caleb Williams, as long as they look competent in the preseason, I think they're going to be flirting with top 10 ADP when we get a week or two down the line.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Tua last year led the league in passing yards and was quarterback, I think 11 or 12 in fantasy points, right? So being a running quarterback has the potential to have more fantasy points because they're getting yards on the ground. They're rushing touchdowns, which are worth 6 in most leagues and not 4 for passing touchdowns. So, a Jayden Daniels has the potential to be that dude, right? It's what we saw out of Anthony Richardson last season. Even for me, like if I punt on quarterback, which has been my strategy all year, uh, and I end up with a Brock Purdy or a Tua, which I'm super happy to have either of them. I could also see myself taking a Jayden Daniels or Caleb Williams just to see, because if one of those guys does hit big, you probably took them late enough. They might move up, like you said, but you probably took them late enough to feel good with your quarterback situation. And I'll start with Tua, and then I'll move into Jayden Daniels, or I start with Brock Purdy, and Jayden Daniels or Caleb Williams is having an amazing season. I'll throw him in. We've talked about, we believe those targets for Keenan Allen and for Terry McLaurin are going to be there. So we have to then say, hey, the quarterback has to do something. He might not be great, but we think they will be.
I think what I would do is if Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams are there starting in the 10th round. Because I'm with you, I'm waiting on quarterback. I like the late round value at the quarterback position. But when I look at last season, when 66 different quarterbacks started an NFL game, and the injury potential of playing the sport of football, I am really interested in actually taking quarterbacks in back-to-back rounds, because I think that's what you're going to have to do. Is I like the idea of a Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Tua, in that 10th or 11th round, and then even the next pick coming back, getting Jayden Daniels or Caleb Williams. I think that is a viable strategy, because if you invest enough in your first 9 picks, you have your starting wide receivers, you have your starting running backs, you set yourself up for week 1. I think this is really good, especially if you're in a keeper league. I think this is a fantastic strategy to think about, depending on what it is. If it's like the big league that we're in, the first year you keep a player, it's the round they were drafted in. And if Jayden Daniels or Caleb Williams hits, and we are looking at a potential, top 10 quarterback for the next few seasons, and you get him in the 11th or 12th round, I really like the strategy of getting that veteran quarterback that is going to put up points in a good offense, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Tua. And then I'm comfortable coming right back around and grabbing one of these guys, because at that point in time, you're looking at what? Maybe your 6th, 7th wide receiver, your 4th running back. If you're waiting on quarterback, I think that could be a really valuable strategy to try to get ahead of it.
If I'm using that strategy and that thought process, which, like, hey, if we're looking towards the future, especially for a keeper league, then I'm actually leaning towards Caleb Williams, because they just paid DJ Moore and they drafted Rome Odunze. So we know he has 2 really good targets for the future, even if Keenan Allen isn't there next season, which, he could or could not be.
Possible.
So I do like long-term potential on Caleb Williams, because they've built him for at least 4 years. You can see it in Chicago. So with that thought process, I would lean Caleb Williams a little bit over Jayden Daniels. I think Jayden Daniels has more upside this season than Caleb Williams, though.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that's evident too in his early ADP, with Jayden Daniels right now being QB 12 versus QB 15 over Caleb Williams. And just a shout out to all the rookie quarterbacks this weekend. It's what you wanted to see. It's, yes, when you look at Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., they were playing a lot against, second, potential third stringers defensively in week 1 of the preseason, but they didn't look overwhelmed. They didn't look lost. That's what you want from your franchise quarterback in their first live game action going up against an NFL defense, is they all looked competent. Bo Nix especially, he checked the box of the accuracy. We thought that was going to be a big thing with him. Sean Payton used him in true RPO situations, run pass, called a read option in the red zone, and Bo Nix went 15 to 21 passing, 125 yards, had a touchdown pass to Marvin Mims. Look at J.J. McCarthy. I think he was the one that impressed me the most, because there's been so much talk that this is Sam Darnold's job. They're going to go with the veteran, let J.J. McCarthy have that time. When McCarthy was throwing darts down the field in the play-action pass game, hitting receivers. Yes, they were open, but he was hitting them in stride. Had a 45-yard touchdown pass, a 33-yard touchdown pass, 11 of 17 for 188. And then Michael Penix is kind of what you expected. He's a bit more of the roller coaster of the quarterbacks, because he's a big, strong guy. He can wow you at times, but be a little bit inconsistent. He was 9 of 16 for 104 yards. I think Bo Nix is working his way into being the starter over Jared Stidham. I think Kevin O'Connell will take the longer route, and I think Sam Darnold can hold off J.J. McCarthy. While these guys are definitely watch list quarterbacks, I do think the impact this season and the higher upside is still Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams. But it was an impressive weekend for these rookies overall.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It was amazing to watch just in general, how they, for me, I got to watch the Jayden Daniels game. I was impressed with how they actually used him. I mean, in the preseason, to see a read option tells me that, hey, they're probably going to run with their quarterback. And if you're
Yeah.
willing to do it in preseason, you're probably going to do it in regular season. So that did give me a little bit of excitement. And I did move Jayden Daniels up in my rankings a little bit. So he moved up to QB 11 on my board. So,
So
you know,
he's
I
sneaking up on people's boards.
yeah.
It's right there with what we're discussing. I think that these guys are really interesting, and Bo Nix, if he has some of those plays, he could be an interesting watch this quarterback, depending on injuries, bye weeks. Because you look at the back end, there's going to be the names, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, and there's going to be young guys in this mix. But I think rookies, starters, or stash, man, Jayden Daniels is going to be close. Caleb Williams is going to be close. But I really like, if you wait on quarterbacks, getting those guys back to back, maybe a 10th, 11th round in the upcoming drafts. One of the trends that was really interesting, and I've been doing a lot of research through ADP and not necessarily just looking at rankings, right? I want to see what the people are doing. Fantasy Pros does a really good job. It's what we use a lot on this show, the PPR ranking. So they compile, ESPN, some of the other draft sites, all the drafts and give you the average draft position. And one of the things that really fascinated me, and you touched on it, Steve, when we've been talking about the lead up to fantasy draft season, so many things change. You look at what we are seeing right now in the second round of PPR drafts. 6 of the 10 picks right now in the second round are running backs. Does that just stat itself, we'll dive into who they are, surprise you right now?
Not anymore. I mean, I think we talked about it in June or July. Like, I knew that we'd start to see running backs sneak up, and here we are.
Yeah, it's definitely happening. I did a few mock drafts just to see, where, they're gonna go, and it looks like they're there.
Yeah. So the question I want to throw out to you guys is, are you at an advantage if you buck the trend and you try to get to potentially top 15 wide receivers? Or do you need to jump on the trend? And I just put it up there on the screen. So you see right now the running backs that are going in the second round. So right at the turn, you have Jonathan Taylor and Jahmyr Gibbs. Travis Etienne, who has vaulted up boards, people realizing what he did last season and the fact he's locked in to a workhorse role for the Jaguars. Derrick Henry and Isaiah Pacheco is no longer a sneaky running back play. I think when you look at what people trust in that Kansas City offense, is Travis Kelce and Isaiah Pacheco. And of course, some of this might factor in where you are in the first round. But when you see this run on what are all workhorse running backs, does this for you come down to what you do in the first round? Or are you willing to potentially go running back, if that value suits you? I'm going to throw it to you, Aaron. When you see kind of this run on running backs, that is going to happen. When kind of people start see these names going, how do you feel about it? And I'm talking about in a PPR league right now.
I think it depends a little bit on where you're drafting in that first round, but I've been considering, something like that where it's running back and a running back, first 2 rounds, and to see where it goes. I definitely, I feel like a lot of people are going to miss out on running backs, and they'll be at the end of that run, and you don't want to be that in a sense, but also it's like, is there any positions, any picks that you can find in the later rounds that are really going to turn out like, that kind of production that you're going to get from these players that, are listed below us. And it's a little tough to expect that. So, it's like ETN's solid, Henry, Pacheco, Jonathan Taylor. It's like, we'll see with Richardson. It's like Gibbs is amazing. So it's like, it's an interesting one. So I don't know what your thoughts are, Steve.
Well, I was trying to look up the ADP real quick. It looks like Kyron Williams is also in that little spot, right? Because we said 6 running backs, so I think we just missed Kyron Williams here. But that also means Saquon Barkley, which when we did our mock draft at the beginning of August, was second, third round, right? He's moved up into the first round. So when I really start to think about it, I'm more interested in going hero RB this year than zero RB, because we had talked about it. We saw there was too much one way. Now they've swung kind of the other way. We're seeing that pendulum swing back. Like, hey, you got to get a running back. But I just put my running backs in tiers, right? So this is as a tier, but I also have Devon Achane in this tier. So if I get one of those guys, I'm still okay walking away and taking one of the running backs in round 2. So I still personally, unless I'm getting CMC, I'm still interested in taking Hill or CD or Chase or Amon Ra, and then in that round 2 range, taking one of those guys, and then going heavy pass catcher. So I want to walk away with one of my top 10 running backs, but I'm okay if I don't get 2. And honestly,
Yeah, it feels like the strategy is get your RB1 early and then wait and see if you can dive into those other guys. And the names that you just threw out there, I quickly just compiled some that we could be looking at. Devon Achane, who I think he's flirting with that mix right now. He's right there at the turn. Look at his ADP of 23, but then you got Josh Jacobs, 28, Sheed White, 35, James Cook is sitting there at 36, Alvin Kamara at 40, Joe Mixon 41, Kenneth Walker 44, and Aaron Jones at 55, and James Conner at 58.
And James Cook is one of my breakouts too. Yeah. So I actually have him ranked a little bit higher, where I'd be okay with him walking away as well. So he's going, round 3. So there's always, if you see one of those running backs a little bit later, that third round, that you're okay walking away with.
That's a good question too. So that list that I just read you. So if you're attacking the wide receivers, and let's put up some of the second round wide receivers so people know what we're talking about. Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Devontae Adams. In third round, I'll add that there. You got a couple of the tight ends start coming off the board. Garrett Olave, Drake London, Mike Evans. So these are the pass catchers that we're talking about amongst these running backs. Is there an advantage to maybe even getting a jump start with the Travis Kelce or Sam Laporta? And we'll talk about the KC passing game, because I think Travis Kelce has solidified himself, unfortunately, due to an injury, a little bit more with his draft position. Or are you comfortable attacking, running backs like Josh Jacobs? So if you go wide receiver, if I end up like Josh Jacobs, James Conner, like that's a way I'm feeling okay. But it's gonna be about how you react to it, and that's why I kind of wanted to throw this out to you guys to see, because when people, all of a sudden it's Taylor, it's Gibbs, Derrick Henry come off the board, you're gonna get a little bit antsy, and it's kind of like, how do you handle that situation versus kind of what you want your draft strategy to be? Because I think what we're seeing is there's some really good wide receiver value developing in the middle of the draft. And my strategy, I've been kind of saying, I want the wide receivers early. I want those big games. It's really being tested with the way people are going to be drafting.
No,
go ahead.
Well, and there's other things that are sitting out there too, right? So you talked about Kelce and Laporta, but if Brandon Ayuk gets traded, that moves Debo and Kittle up too. So there's still a lot of volatility in this ADP, right? Like, yeah, we're getting close, but there's so many little things that could completely change this. The CD Lamb's holdout stays.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, if Ayuk gets traded, we could see wide receiver value go up a little bit more, and then you're 100% right. Then, maybe I do start to change and go, hey, maybe I want to grab a running back in the first round and then just figure out the rest of my team from there, just because I feel like there's enough great wide receiver value. So at this point, it's hard to see exactly where it's going to be because, you know, every league's a little bit different. But I really am just tearing out my positions at this point and going, okay, this is where I'm comfortable, and this is one of the ones I want to walk away with. So for me, I want to walk away with in a 3 wide receiver league. I want to walk away with 3 of my top 24 wide receivers and 1 of my top 10 running backs,
And I
and I'd
think
be
that
stoked.
I'm with you in that strategy. You know, it's a very good way to build a team as opposed to just looking at rankings and go, I'm going to pick, you know, the 5th quarterback or the 7th. But then that's why I think ADP is important in that regard, because it gives you an idea of where you're going to need to attack these players. And when you tier them like that, Steve, that is exactly why I'm like using ADP so much in the conversation, because ADP will give you an idea, like a blueprint of probably how your league is going to play out. When you're staring at rankings, that's not going to tell you what you're going to do. So looking at ADP will allow you to do what Steve's talking about. Kind of start writing out, hey, I want, the second round, these are where the guys are going. I'm comfortable with, X, Y, and Z. Third round, I'd hope to get this guy by. And kind of that strategy will help you as opposed to just checking things off rankings. And then you're going to end up chasing things, and then you're going to end up missing out on value.
Well, if running backs keep going this way, where if you're picking at the first half and you, let's say, pick number 2, you miss out on CMC, so you take, CD or Tyreek, and you're not grabbing one of those other running backs because they go in your draft, I'm also okay with then going, all right, well, let me walk away with 3 of my top, 15 wide receivers, and then go, hey, I'm going to just get Alvin Kamara, James Conner, and a bunch of pass catching running backs that hopefully can suffice. So you can always do it that way as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Steve, because I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No, you're good.
I've had to do that, like kind of we're having a conversation with like keeper league that, I sent, that screenshot of like running backs are always kept in that league. And it's, for me, I've had to do that with wide receivers. I have had to, kind of take, as many wide receivers as I can and find a running back that has value. It's just how that, league has worked out for the past couple of years because, running backs are valued by them so much. So it is something that, could be in the realm of possibilities for people. So
Yeah, and I think one of the things which is a good transition is because we're kind of seeing running backs pushed up. If you do want to chase that trend, there's some really good value popping up mid round, and I want to touch on big name players, but what I think should be happening. So let's say you want to go out there and maybe you go wide receiver, running back, or even running back, which seems crazy in a PPR world, but that's kind of a trendy thing right now with the way people are drafting. You get to round 5, 6, 7. What are your wide receiver options going to be looking at? And one of the things that I do like is I saw T. Higgins sitting there at 56. I'm like, wait a second, that's a 6th round pick for T. Higgins. I love that value because that's a dude that with Joe Burrow on the field, Joe Burrow knows that, all right, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are going to eat in that passing attack. So T. Higgins is definitely someone to target in the 6th round. I know we've talked about it a ton. I'm pushing Keenan Allen down my list a little bit. It's positive with what he did. Look at Keenan Allen. He played on 100% of the snaps with Caleb Williams. You know he's going to be a starter. He played reps on the outside in 12 personnel, or 2 tight end sets. So he was on the field with DJ Moore. And also when they went to 11 personnel, he was in the slot. So I think that is good for his potential target share. But I'm looking at wide receivers in this range, and I'm pushing up Terry McLaurin. And I just think that the way we were talking about Jayden Daniels, and you mentioned it, Steve, like if we're going to like some of these skill players in an offense, it's because the quarterback's playing well, and the quarterback's playing well. There's no one, not even Johan Dotson right now, that is going to challenge Terry McLaurin when it comes to needing to make a play. And that is why I am really looking at Terry McLaurin, who's going wide receiver 33 right now. Like I'd be comfortable taking him in the 6th round at this point in time. If I'm talking about maybe solidifying my wide receiver 3 or even having a flex play, I think Terry McLaurin is in for a big season. But when you look at kind of what we're seeing with that mid-round passing value, and I'll throw the other names out there that we're seeing going in that range. We got George Pickens, 60th overall, Tank Dell, 62nd, Christian Kirk, 70, Calvin Ridley, 73. How you guys feeling about these mid-draft wide receivers, especially now that, as we're talking, if you're going running back early, some of these guys are then going to be your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3.
Yeah, in this range, there's so many choices that are gonna give you production. They're on the field. It's like generally they're the first guy. It's everyone that you listed is everyone that I wanted to talk about. So going that running back first, it's like you're able to find more wide receiver value in the mid rounds than you are at running back. So it's there's definitely a lot of good there in my opinion. So that's probably why things are changing and shaping the way they are. But I don't know. We'll see.
Well, just based off of, so I just wanted to do a quick look and base it off of what you're saying. If you went running back. So let's just say you end up with a Saquon Barkley and Jahmyr Gibbs because they're kind of in that range.
Mm-hmm.
You then could go potentially with a Mike Evans,
Right.
and pair that up with a Cooper Kupp, and then Jalen Waddle has fallen into the 5th round. So you could go Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, and Jalen Waddle with Saquon Barkley and Jahmyr Gibbs. So, potentially what you're saying isn't impossible. And Jalen Waddle and Cooper Kupp are in my top 15 wide receivers. That's not where they're being ranked on. ADP says Jalen Waddle's wide receiver 20 and Cooper Kupp is 18.
Yeah, and I think Waddle is a factor of just running backs going up, and then maybe some people thinking
Cooper Kupp has moved up because Puka got hurt.
Yeah.
We're starting to see the Texans wide receivers have now moved ahead of him, all 3 of them. So Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Nico Collins have all moved ahead of him, which is not how we were drafting, even 2 weeks ago. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk have now moved closer. They're ahead of him again still, but they've moved closer to him. So we are seeing a big difference in that, but we're also seeing the quarterbacks make these massive leaps up. Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen have now moved into the 2nd, 3rd round. And when we were drafting not too long ago, those guys were in the 4th. So you're not wrong. You do have to know how your league is drafting, but I'd be happy with that team. If I could end up with that team, right, I'd feel like I was going to win a championship.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of wanted to piggyback our 2nd round running back conversation with this, because it goes hand in hand. So if you go running back early, then you're going to need to be filling with wide receiver. And I'm kind of being drawn back to the dark side. Is I might be more comfortable going running backs early because of kind of what we're seeing out with this wide receiver value, even in the 3rd round. If I'm coming in the 3rd round and I can still take a DK Metcalf, Chris Olave, and I think we're all fans of Waddle, like Waddle in the 3rd or 4th round, and you start building your team that way. And then, by round 5, you can start, all right, do I want to attack Dalton Kincaid? Does one of the other tight ends maybe slip a little bit because of what's going on? And to me, you just have the biggest thing is once you figure out where you're drafting, we know all leagues are different, right? And so we can say that about everything, but have kind of a strategy for each. Like maybe go a couple in your mind, run it down a couple times of, all right, if I go running back early, what does my team look like? If I go wide receiver early, but this is really the first time in the process. Like I'm not dead set on a strategy right now. I think that there's multiple ways to attack. It's fantasy football, man. And we can't be dead set on anything. Like the best player that can win your league, we could pick him off the waiver wire after week 1. We know that.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of doing this show with you guys, going all this research, getting ready for the season. I find myself like a lot more flexible than I thought I was going to be heading into draft season.
Yeah, definitely. It's a little nebulous right now.
Yeah, I've done a few mock drafts and tried both strategies, right? Go wide receiver heavy or running back heavy, and You can end up, if you draft well, you can end up liking both teams. But I have preferred right now the teams where I draft a running back a little earlier over the wide receiver.
And we're talking about PPR football, man. PPR
Yeah.
fantasy
Yeah, no,
football.
right.
We're still liking these running backs early. But I think that's also a way the league is going, that there's more valuable wide receivers from that. And so are able to maybe lock in some of those stud running backs early and then find some of those things later in the draft. And speaking about value, I want to talk about Kansas City, because this was an offense last year that was about 15th, middle of the road when it comes to yards, even points per game, but it's still the Super Bowl champs. It's Patrick Mahomes, as Steve mentioned, his name value. He's going to be one of the first 3 quarterbacks drafted in your league. It's Travis Kelce, that while he's not a first round pick anymore, people aren't letting him fall past the 3rd round. They're jumping on him. He's battling Sam Laporta, for the tight end 1 in drafts. We've seen people is a solid player. Now, I think what's interesting with Pacheco is him versus the other 2nd round running backs with the ceiling. Maybe we can get into that, kind of come back around when we talk about those RB2s. But it was set up that this wide receiver core, depth-wise, we know when Patrick Mahomes had Tyreek Hill, it was cray-cray. But depth-wise, it was looking at the best unit Mahomes has had since Tyreek Hill left. I know it's not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been, it's more Valdez-Scantling and Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney and trying to make all these things work. And all of a sudden, Rashee Rice, fantastic postseason. You brought over Hollywood Brown, and he's a productive NFL wide receiver. You spent some 1st-round pick on Xavier Worthy. Well, now that's all up in the air, because unfortunately for Marquise Brown, he suffered a dislocated clavicle on the first play, 11-yard reception in the preseason. Rashee Rice, it's just that giant question mark of, is the case going to go through, and is he going to get suspended this season? Is it going to be put off and then he'll play and then maybe he'll suffer a suspension next year? And then Xavier Worthy, it's just the fact of, are this many rookies going to be good? Because you have Marvin Harrison Jr., top 20 pick, people like Malik Neighbors. Keon Coleman is another wide receiver that could be sliding into a potential number 1 role in Buffalo. Brian Thomas Jr. had a highlight reel catch for the Jaguars over the weekend, another 1st-round pick. But I'm going to lay it out for you guys, and then I'll see it. Right now, Travis Kelce is probably not someone I'm drafting, because I'm just not chasing tight end in a 2nd or 3rd round. But I think the injury to Marquise Brown, the uncertainty with Rashee Rice, I think it solidifies his value there. So I don't think that's a bad pick. It's just not the route I'm going in fantasy drafts. Rashee Rice in the 8th round, I'm taking a chance on him. Xavier Worthy in maybe the 9th or 10th round, I'm taking a chance on him. And then Hollywood Brown's injury, he would be someone maybe in the 13th or 14th round. If he's still there, I'm drafting. It's a lot of uncertainty. It's the injury, but I'm still going to take a chance, because I think the one thing with the Kansas City pass catchers is the value is not inflated. And an injured Marquise Brown, young Xavier Worthy, or Rashee Rice, even with that stuff, if you're taking them, wide receiver 36 to 40, I still think you invest in the Kansas City pass game. Aaron, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm definitely invested in there. I probably, and I might be thinking of just keepers, but I for Xavier Worthy, I think I would want him on my team, but that's just me. It's like Rice has fallen. The suspension thing's a little interesting where it might be. It, like you said, Kelce's going to be the man for that team still. But I think there's enough that he's going to continue to do Kelce things, and where he's at, it's a good value. So, but I definitely want Xavier Worthy if I had that choice, just for the long term.
If you're drafting today, I'm going to tell you to get Rashee Rice in the 7th round or draft him early, because no charges have been brought against him. I guarantee you by the time we actually get to draft late August, early September, he's going to be going in the 4th or 5th round. He's not going to be suspended this year, because there's nothing, they haven't brought charges against him. The NFL's not doing anything. So he's going to get pushed up. So he's one of those guys that if you're drafting now, I would take him. because I don't think he's going to get
Like
suspended.
if anything happens, you think it happens next year.
Yeah, if it happens, it's going to be like Alvin Kamara 2 years ago, where we're like, he's going to get suspended, never gets suspended, and then he gets suspended the next. Yeah, so
kind of use that to your advantage right now in drafts. Maybe
yeah,
toss up Rashee Rice. Be like, yo, guys, like he was there. There's no, it wasn't me. Like he was there, y'all. He's gonna get in trouble. Maybe talk it up to your league mates a little bit.
Exactly. So use that to your advantage. Like by the time if you're drafting late August or like we draft on Labor Day, right? September, right before the league, he's going to be going in the 4th or 5th round, which is where he should go with how he performed last season. That's just, you're not going to get him where you're getting him at this moment. So if you can get him now, do it. But other than that, like I would love to get him later, but I know he's going to be going. He'll probably move ahead of at some point Jaylen Waddle because he's the wide receiver. I do. He's the wide receiver 1 on the Kansas City Chiefs.
The injury,
the
Hollywood Brown injury is going to linger.
Pushes him up. Yep.
So it's going to push Rashee Rice up. I think Worthy's the interesting one because I think when people start getting ready for their draft, he's the one that might sneak up a couple rounds because they'll just be like, yo, this is a first round pick that runs this fast and is in the Kansas City offense. Boom.
But as we've talked about, a quarterback can usually only sustain 2 targets. And Patrick Mahomes proved he could sustain Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, but he wasn't sustaining a 3rd target. I don't think that changes. I don't think that's Andy Reid's offense. Like
that's why I like Worthy late. Yeah. If I'm in a keeper league, like if I can go on a run where 10th, 11th, 12th round, depending on what I'm doing at quarterback, maybe I even go like Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy back to back. Sit on them for a little bit, like and willing to know like, hey, these are guys that like don't move. Like sit on them and use your other roster spots for some movement. I think that could be there because they're going to work in Xavier Worthy a little bit. Is he going to be an every week starter early in the season? Maybe not, but could he be flex worthy while Marquise Brown is out? Possibly, yeah. But
and don't get me wrong, it's like I liked Rashee Rice. I like him, and it's like I'm probably playing the safer route. But what Steve said is 100% right. It's like Rashee Rice he's gonna move up. He is the number 1 target on that team. It's like Mahomes trusts him, and it's like him moving past Waddle and stuff like that. I definitely it's something that I can see, but we will see. We'll play the waiting game and see where it lands.
But I do think the Alvin Kamara benchmark is a really good one to put with Rashee Rice because you figure something's going to happen. Like he was there was an accident, people got hurt, but it's a process that's taking a while, and so maybe like again play that up, use it to your advantage if you want Rashee Rice, and if you can get him and you slot him in, if you draft him in 6th or 7th round, slot him in as your wide receiver through his upside. Probably feeling pretty good about your team. I think that's some good advice there from Steve. But when you look at kind of the week 1 of the preseason, a big thing is to this point, no major injuries. And that is always going to change anything we talk about if there's traumatic injury. Some things to touch on, Malik Neighbors, ankle, foot, kind of sprain, something to keep an eye on. Foot injuries. I did see some pop up with Jahmyr Gibbs. He left practice getting his leg looked at. You brought it up earlier, Steve. Puka Nacua not playing, but they believe it's just a bruise, and he should be good to go. And Puka and Cooper Kupp locked in that offense with Matthew Stafford.
Jaylen Waddle hasn't practiced in a week, so he's dealing with a leg injury. So they said it's week to week, but same thing. We're still minor injuries that we're already looking at.
And keep an eye. But so far so good with no major injuries to some of the marquee fantasy players that we're going to be looking at this season. But the holdouts are interesting right now, and it's not just CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jones having word salad every other press conference that he goes out there trying to talk about wanting CeeDee Lamb on his football team, but not willing to pay him. Jamar Chase isn't playing. Now they're saying, he's injured, but he wants a contract. And Cincinnati straight up said, their ownership is like, we're not paying you. The Bengals are still a team that is very frugal. And yes, they paid Joe Burrow, but they still have an old school owner who does not like to pay money. And it's not just Jamar Chase. You're looking at Sam Hubbard, looking at some of the pass rushers going there. When it comes to these guys, I'm talking about Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb. Are they locked in regardless? Because I don't think either is sitting out the season. Like, I don't see them giving up a year or even till week 9, because you have to come back at that point in time to get credit for this year so they could become a free agent or anything after this year. Are any of these contract situations affecting how you think about these guys in fantasy at all?
They moved down for me later in the first round. So CeeDee Lamb, if he holds out and he plays week 1, he's still a first round pick, but he's no longer my number 2. He moves for me behind Amon-Ra and Justin Jefferson. And that's purely because history tells us every time these guys sit out for a long period of time, when they come back and they just try to go full throttle, they get hurt. So my fear is always the same. I know you're amazing. I know you can play. I know I don't even worry about your relationship with your quarterback. However, you haven't been playing, you haven't been running, you haven't been doing explosive movements because you're not practicing. Is there a potential for soft tissue injury? 100%. And that scares me a little bit. So I'm not saying don't draft him in the first round. I'm just no longer going to take CeeDee Lamb's number 2.
So if
He's
you're
just
back
going to be
in,
number 7 or 8.
Yeah. So if you're back into the first round, if your league feels that way, that's an opportunity for you.
Yep.
To jump on, Jamar Chase or CeeDee Lamb. And I think it's fascinating too when you look at, like, really, Tyreek Hill was in the conversation, but last year it was like a no-brainer. It was like the conversation was, hey, Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're actually seeing both these guys middle of the first round right now. And I'm with you. I think Amon-Ra can back up what he did last year. Like, I'm still rolling with Tyreek Hill at this point in time, wide receiver wise. The one that I'm probably feeling more confident in, just understanding Kevin O'Connell's offense, seeing what he was able to do last season, is Justin Jefferson. I think that if you're like taking Justin Jefferson 4th or 5th overall, like, I think he can back that up for you in fantasy this year.
Well, so for just so everybody kind of knows, when I look at it, I have CMC and Tyreek Hill 1 and 2 right now until CeeDee Lamb comes back, because they have huge ceilings and high floors, right? Like, I know those guys are going to kill it, and I also know they can go off for 50 points, and that's why CeeDee Lamb's up there, because we know he can do that as well. The reason I have moved Amon-Ra up right behind Justin Jefferson is because Justin Jefferson's kind of that same level. Amon-Ra, after those first 3 or 4 people, Amon-Ra is safe. Like, I don't expect Amon-Ra to finish the season as wide receiver 1. I don't think he's going to have 50-point games, but I don't think Amon-Ra is ever going to score under 20. I just think he's
Under
a
20?
safe. Yeah, I think he's a safe 20-point player.
That is why I did not. I wanted, like, not the number 1 overall pick to have this discussion. He's my favorite first round pick with his value,
because he's super safe. He's probably not going to score 40 points ever in a week, but if I know I'm going to get 15, let's just call it 18. He's going to score 18 points. I don't want to be over, excited about him, but he's going to score you 18 points every week. I know what I'm getting out of my first round talent or my first round pick. I'm happy with it.
But he averaged 19.4 points per game last
year.
Right. Steve was close.
So, and that's why I'm saying, like, that's why it's, for me, it's CMC, because he has that potential to score 50. Tyreek Hill, same potential. Justin Jefferson has that same potential, and CeeDee Lamb, if he doesn't hold out. And then Amon-Ra. He's literally so safe that
he's the steadiest of pretty much everyone.
Jamar Chase is kind of dependent on Joe Burrow, who's been injury prone. And
I think all these guys are, to an extent, with their starting quarterback. That's
Justin Jefferson is kind of injury prone proof. Like, he should probably be going higher, because if he doesn't get injured, the dude played 10 games last year and had 1,000 yards. Like,
yeah, right.
Like I agree with you. Kevin O'Connell's kind of safe. But Jamar Chase is 100% dependent on Joe Burrow, and he's not playing. So that injury scares me. And that's kind of what I think of Bijan as well. Like, I think you could be amazing, and I think you probably should be drafted high, but there's still that, like, that's where the risk comes in, is that later half of the draft. And that's where I'm good with the first like 7 picks, and then after that I hate my life.
Oh, very interesting. I'm
Yeah.
going overall pick life right now, so having that conversation. You speak of soft tissue injury. What are we looking at with Christian McCaffrey right now?
Yep.
Calf not playing in the preseason.
But Christian McCaffrey had the same injury last season
That is true.
and played through it, and
That
still
is
was
very
Christian
true.
McCaffrey.
How many times can you mess with fantasy football gods? We shall see. But this is really interesting stuff in the reaction to week 1. We're going to get more numbers in week 2 to help solidify some of these things. And one of the notes, if you don't know, now you will know, is there's a reason Steve talks about 2 pass catchers. I think that's a really good way to build your team, is try to identify the top 2 targets on an offense. It might seem easy, sure, but one of the things that even with the starters playing 1 or 2 series, we can really get a sense of who's playing with who, where they're lined up. It's like the Keenan Allen being out there in 12 personnel, 2 wide receiver sets, and moving to the slot in 3 wide receiver sets. That's why it solidifies me. I love his value in the mid round. Or Terry McLaurin, knowing that he's going to be the number 1 target for Jayden Daniels. You can learn some valuable things when it comes to fantasy football with even just 1 or 2 series in the preseason. But now it is time for the game that will soon be sweeping not just the nation, but the world when it comes to fantasy football. Because what do? We talk about rankings, who's better, pitting player A versus player B, and it is that time for Blind Resume, brought to you by one and only Steven Masterson. So, Steve, we'll start with the quarterbacks.
All right, well, let's get into it. So this is to mess with you a little bit, both of you guys. So let's start with it. Quarterback A last season had 4,159 yards, threw 32 touchdowns, and had 11 interceptions. His ADP right now is 80 overall. Quarterback B threw for 4,575 yards. So he threw for more yards, 30 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, but is going off the board at 108 overall. And I wanted to give you this distinction because they're so close in yards, they're so close in touchdowns and interceptions, but 28 picks between each other. All right. So quarterback A, Jordan Love. Quarterback B is Jared Goff. So this was an Aaron. I'm going to pick with Aaron on this one. So that's why I wanted to give this to you guys. I wanted to talk about it. Like, sometimes we get stuck on the name value, but you can see quarterback A and B very similar.
That's good. And you look at Jordan Love, of course, he's going, as you said, right there, flirting with, 7th, 8th round selection. And Jordan Love was QB5 last season, finished with 319 fantasy points. And Jared Goff was QB7, 289. So it's not a drastic difference, but it's the value you're paying up for. And I think this is kind of goes back to what we were just talking about with first round picks. I think what people are seeing with Jordan Love is there's more flash, and Goff is the floor play. Like Goff, because I was playing Jared Goff at the end of the season.
Yeah.
I never got 25, 28-point games to my quarterback. I got 17-point games. I got 18-point games. And over the course of a 16, 17-game fantasy season, whatever you're playing, that will add up. But you're missing out maybe on some of those splash weeks. And that's why, though, I do like Jared Goff as maybe a stack with one of the young quarterbacks that we're talking about.
You got to think too of his home and away difference for Jared Goff. That was kind of a big one.
They played 2 games outside. It's fine.
That is a factor to take into account.
That is.
All teams are building domes. The Browns, their new stadium proposal.
Doug Dimmadome, he's making money, man.
That's a factor. Playing inside.
That was a mess with Aaron's stat. There's a mess with JJ in here as well.
Uh-oh.
So we'll get to it. But
I knew that second one was Jared Goff, but I was like, is that Jordan Love? I was like, no.
Yes, that's a good one. So let's get into our running backs. All right. So running back A last season had 1,167 yards, 12 touchdowns, caught 28 balls, and is being drafted at ADP 23. Running back B had 1,035 yards, had 8 touchdowns, had 29 receptions, but is being drafted at 76 overall. Running back A, Derrick Henry. Running back B, Najee Harris.
That one's a good one.
This was a good one because their catches and yards and their catches are almost exactly the same. Now I know we're talking Derrick Henry is also going into, the Ravens offense, and we do believe he'll be better. But it was an interesting stat to throw out just because they were so close. And we are drafting Najee Harris as if he is significantly worse. But we expect Pittsburgh offense to be significantly better.
I've kind of liked, as much as I've hated Najee Harris from last season, I've kind of liked where he's going. I could kind of live with it because I think he's probably gonna get similar production to last year, which was turned out in the second half of the season was pretty solid. So
Najee Harris is your classic RB2.
Yeah.
It's a guy that you're always gonna be like, oh, I feel like I could get more from. You don't get those high sailing weeks, but you're talking about RB23 last year.
He's the perfect grab if you go zero running back.
You know what was
or
interesting?
Hero running back.
So I've been kind of hesitant to jump on the Jaylen Warren train. And everyone in the last couple of years, like Jaylen Warren needs to be the guy. He needs to be this. You know who Jaylen Warren is? Tony Pollard. Like you're gonna give him the full snap share, and then you're gonna be disappointed. So it works.
Yeah.
Warren and Najee Harris, because you know who is RB22 last year? One spot ahead of Najee Harris by like not even 0.9 fantasy points. Jaylen Warren.
Jaylen Warren, yep.
Yeah.
So I think Harris is a really fascinating guy of plug and play, decent floor. He's not going to be the funnest fantasy player, but he'll get you along. And the Warren stuff really surprised me. I did not know he was right there. It felt like Jaylen Warren was a lot more hit or miss than Najee Harris.
Jaylen Warren did have Najee missed a game or two, so Jaylen Warren did have a few games where he was the primary back, which did boost his points a little bit.
But he picked it up. He had 61 receptions, so that was no big advantage in PPR. And whether it's just a Russell Wilson, because they traded Deontay Johnson, like I expect Warren to still have a nice chunk of that passing game work.
Agreed. All right, we ready for the next one?
Oh, yeah.
Wide receiver. Wide receiver A had 108 receptions, 1,243 yards, 7 touchdowns, and is right now 59th in ADP. Wide receiver B had 103 receptions, 1,144 yards, 8 touchdowns, and ADP is 17. So wide receiver A is Keenan Allen. Wide receiver B is Davante Adams. Now, I wanted to throw this out there. We all know wide receiver A, Keenan Allen, went to a new team. But he produced those numbers with an injury. And Davante Adams, we believe will be good, but he still got another new quarterback, and he's still on the Raiders. So that was why I wanted to bring these two up, because I felt like
because Allen had massive games early in the year.
Yep.
Got hurt season. Adams to the same extent. He had some big blow up games, but he was a little bit more consistent than I thought he was going to be overall. And I think that's why when you bring up where these guys are getting drafted, it goes along in the conversation we were having of that round 2 choice. Because in the second round, you're having to select between Davante Adams or kind of the last bit of the quote unquote elite tier of running backs, or top tier RB1s.
Yeah, after kind of doing a little bit of this research, it made me realize I'm not as interested in Devontae Adams in the second round. Just purely for value, right? Like when I really
Yeah,
started looking into this, I was like,
his name and how much touchdowns he's scored before is really what pushes him. It's like leading leading touchdowns. It's
yeah.
like, you've seen it before and you hope you could get it again, but will it? I don't know. We'll see with Aiden O'Connell and if Minshew becomes the quarterback, because it looked like Aiden O'Connell's the starter right now. So same with
Yeah. So
a little bit of last year.
last year Devontae Adams finished wide receiver 10. So he returned good value for you, averaged about 15.6 fantasy points per game. But still, when you hit that 100 reception mark, like I'm interested.
Mhm.
But oh man, that's such a good one. I love blind resume because it makes you think.
Well, and it kind of solidifies what you were saying. Keenan Allen late is great value.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, last one. Tight end. So tight end A. This was the perfect one because they ended up tying in receptions. Tight end A had 73 receptions, 673 yards, 2 touchdowns, but is going right now as ADP 52. Tight end B had 73 receptions, 719 yards, and 6 touchdowns, ADP 138. Tight end A is Dalton Kincaid.
Ooh.
Tight end B is Cole Kmet.
Oh, I was not expecting those two at all. For some reason, I was thinking maybe like Trey McBride, Jake Ferguson, but
I was thinking Jake Ferguson.
So this was the I'm gonna mess with JJ one because we do believe Stephon Diggs is gone, so we should see an improvement in Dalton Kincaid. However, Cole Kmet produced well with a subpar quarterback, is what we would usually say. Now, I do not think because they brought in so much talent, he will be part of that share, but it does kind of show you might be able to get one of those tight ends a little bit later who can help you win and not have to go a Laporta or Kelce in that first 3-4 rounds.
well, okay, this is because Kincaid has been one of my man crushes. Like he's been the guy I've been riding with in a lot of the mock drafts and someone I'm targeting openly, in all the leagues that I'm playing in, just because I think that he's bound to score more than 2 touchdowns in that offense, even with Josh Allen dominating all the red zone looks. The dude just scores touchdowns like crazy on the ground. Even with being kind of a back end in the targets, with Stephon Diggs until the last 6 weeks of the season, it was still the wide receiver 1. You got a tight end 11 finish out of Dalton Kincaid, but you're betting a lot. If you're taking Dalton Kincaid in the 5th round, you're expecting him to honestly be vying for tight end 4 or 5.
Yep.
Finish.
Make that leap.
And then to your point, though, if you're talking about maybe waiting, the tight end 2 last year was Evan Ingram. And you can get him after the 5th round. I think Jake Ferguson is playing Dallas still. George Kittle. It'd be interesting to see kind of what happens with him and Brandon Ayuk and that target value. But that is an interesting because you're right. Cole Kmet, I don't think he's putting up those numbers this year.
No.
In that passing offense. But the point you're kind of getting at is if you don't go tight end early, and it's Travis Kelce or Sam Laporta in the first 3 rounds, are you better off kind of waiting this year?
Yeah. So really what I was trying to do is especially point out last year, their stats, what we're expecting from them is big jumps, right? But those stats don't always matter as much when you can get that value late. So you might be able to get the same value from Cole Kmet as you get from, the 5th or 6th tight end taken off the board. And it might not be a Cole Kmet, and it might not be Jared Goff or Jordan Love, right? But the whole point of that was, hey, these are guys we love, and I love them too. So I don't want to come off as I don't like them, but that doesn't mean you can't find value late in the draft. And just because you miss on a position doesn't mean you need to scramble on the position. Because I missed on Dalton Kincaid for whatever reason, because JJ does this podcast and some guy in our league goes, I'm taking Dalton Kincaid because I want to get JJ. that doesn't mean he has to then scramble. Go, okay, I need to take a tight end here.
Immediately
'Cause
pivot to the next tight end.
Right.
Right.
I've watched that year after year after year, right? Last year I took Mark Andrews and I watched the guy right after me take Darren Waller. As he said, damn. So just, it's the point of this was to make sure everybody's aware. Don't panic when your player gets taken. There's value late. You just have to be willing to look for it. And that's what the point of this show is we're going to help you find the value a little bit later. These are the players we really love, but you're not going to get all of them. I'm not going to be able to draft all of my man crushes. So who are the next players, right? Jordan Love. Okay, hey, I can get away with Jared Goff and then maybe draft Jayden Daniels, Caleb Williams. Or, okay, I missed out on Dalton Kincaid. That doesn't mean I can't take Jake Ferguson and be one of the later guys in the draft. So just kind of keep that in mind. And that was the whole point of this one is they're all big differences, but close in
resume.
Yeah, close in stats.
You're getting pretty good at this one, Steve.
Yeah.
I like it. And everything we've done so far is leading up to fantasy draft season. We've done the dynasty content. We've done second-year breakout players. We've done our mock drafts, which is still relevant because we talk about just the different strategies from where you're drafting in a 10-team league, 1, 5, 10, and how that kind of shapes up. And then the Fantasy Football 101 show that you guys did last week was fantastic stuff for people who are just looking for the nuts and bolts. What does this mean? What do you need to be looking for? So we are building our fantasy draft kit show by show. So give us a look, like and subscribe, please, and thank you. You can look back at all the content as you get ready for your fantasy football drafts. Of course, you can follow us on the X. I think there's a big event going on X tonight, but I don't really want to worry about that. 3 Dudes FFS, of course, on the Instagram. 3 Dudes Fantasy Football. Yeah, there's some underscores in there, but just type in 3 Dudes Fantasy Football. You'll find us there. And if you're watching this, YouTube channel right here. Like and subscribe. But this has been the Fantasy Spin preseason edition. And gentlemen, may the ADP ever be in your favor. Until next time.
Peace.
Later, y'all.